In the small town of Maplewood, life moved at a slow pace. The streets were lined with modest homes, family-owned shops, and parks where kids played until the sun dipped below the horizon. But beneath this calm exterior lay simmering tensions that had been building for years. Many residents felt uneasy around the police, especially those from minority communities. Stories of unfair treatment and unnecessary stops spread like wildfire, creating a divide between the people and those sworn to protect them. At the center of these tensions were two officers, Carl Dawson and Greg Miller. Both men had been on the force for over a decade, but their reputation wasn't exactly stellar. They were known for their quick tempers and dismissive attitudes, particularly toward black residents. While some colleagues turned a blind eye to their behavior, others quietly disapproved, knowing it was only a matter of time before something serious happened. Carl was tall and broad-shouldered, with a voice that could cut through steel when he wanted to intimidate someone. He wore his authority like armor, using it to justify every harsh word or heavy-handed action. Greg, shorter and wiry, often followed Carl's lead, though he sometimes seemed uncomfortable with how far things went. Still, fear of being labeled soft kept him silent most of the time. On this particular evening, Carl and Greg were patrolling one of Maplewood's quieter neighborhoods. It was nearing dusk, and the air carried a slight chill. The streets were mostly empty, save for an occasional car passing by. As they drove slowly down Elm Street, their eyes scanned the area for anything, or anyone, that might seem out of place. That's when they spotted him. A man stood outside a convenience store, leaning casually against a lamppost. He was dressed in dark jeans, a gray hoodie, and sneakers. His hands were shoved into his pockets, and he appeared to be waiting for someone or something. To Carl and Greg, his presence immediately raised red flags. "Look at this guy," Carl muttered, narrowing his eyes as he slowed the patrol car. "What's he doing just standing there?" Greg glanced at him skeptically. "Maybe he's just waiting for a ride." Carl snorted. "Yeah, right. Or maybe he's casing the joint. You know what kind of troublemakers hang around places like this." Without another word, Carl pulled the car over to the curb and stepped out, leaving Greg no choice but to follow. Their boots clicked sharply against the pavement as they approached the man. Up close, they could see he was younger than they'd initially thought, mid-30s perhaps, and well-built. His face was calm, almost serene, which only fueled Carl's suspicion. "Hey, you!" Carl barked, his tone sharp and accusatory. "What are you doing here?" The man looked up, clearly surprised by the sudden confrontation. For a moment, he simply stared at them, then straightened up and met Carl's gaze evenly. "I'm just waiting for my friend," he said, his voice steady and polite. "Is there a problem?" "There might be," Carl shot back, taking a step closer. "You got ID on you? We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area." The man frowned slightly, clearly annoyed but making an effort to remain composed. "Suspicious activity? I haven't done anything wrong, but sure, I can show you my ID." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wallet, flipping it open to reveal a driver's license. Greg leaned in to get a better look. The name on the card read, Marcus Johnson. The address listed was within the county, not too far from where they currently stood. Everything seemed legitimate, but Carl wasn't satisfied. "You live around here?" Carl demanded, his tone dripping with skepticism. "No, I don't," Marcus replied calmly. "But I stopped by to grab something from the store." "Is that illegal now?" Carl bristled at the hint of sarcasm in Marcus's voice. "Don't get smart with me," he snapped. "We're just doing our job. People complain about guys like you hanging around acting shady." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Guys like me? What does that mean exactly?" Before Carl could respond, Greg interjected awkwardly, sensing the situation escalating. "Come on, Carl, let's just check if anyone inside saw anything." But Carl wasn't ready to back down. He took another step forward, invading Marcus's personal space. "Listen, buddy, we don't need your attitude. Maybe you should think twice about mouthing off to cops." Marcus sighed, visibly frustrated but still controlled. "I'm not mouthing off. I'm asking questions because I have rights. Same as anyone else." If you don't have a reason to detain me, I'd like to go. Oh, you'd like to go, huh? Carl sneered. Well, guess what? Now you're coming with us. Just to clear things up. Greg shifted uncomfortably, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. Sure enough, a few pedestrians had paused nearby, curious about the commotion. One woman clutched her phone tightly, debating whether to record what was happening. Another man shook his head and walked away, muttering something under his breath. Marcus crossed his arms, refusing to be intimidated. On what grounds? You haven't given me any reason to believe I've broken the law. That's not your call to make, Carl growled, reaching for his handcuffs. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. For a brief moment, Marcus considered resisting, not violently but firmly stating his refusal to comply without proper cause. However, he quickly realized that doing so might only escalate the situation further. Instead, he complied reluctantly, turning around and allowing Carl to cuff him. The metal bit into his wrists, but he didn't flinch. As Carl tightened the cuffs, Greg hovered uncertainly, unsure of how to handle the growing tension. Carl, maybe we should double-check." "Shut up, Greg," Carl interrupted, his voice low and biting. "We're taking him in. End of story." With that, Carl yanked Marcus toward the patrol car, shoving him roughly onto the hood. Marcus winced but remained silent, knowing that reacting emotionally would only give Carl more ammunition to use against him. Meanwhile, Greg opened the back door, avoiding eye contact with both his partner and the man they were arresting. Marcus was pushed into the back seat. He caught glimpses of the bystanders who had gathered. Some looked angry, others scared, and a few simply confused. Among them was a young woman walking her dog. She held her phone discreet, warily, capturing the scene unfolding before her. Marcus locked eyes with her briefly, silently pleading for her to bear witness to what was happening. The patrol car pulled away from the curb, leaving behind a trail of unease in its wake. Inside, Marcus sat quietly, his mind racing. He knew this wasn't just about him. It was about every person who had ever been targeted unfairly because of the color of their skin. And though he couldn't change everything overnight, he vowed to do whatever it took to ensure justice prevailed in the end. The ride to the police station was tense and silent, save for the occasional crackle of the radio in the front seat. Marcus sat in the back, his hands cuffed behind him, staring out the window at the passing streets. His mind raced with thoughts about what would happen next. He knew he hadn't done anything wrong, but he also understood that innocence didn't always matter in situations like this. The officer's actions had been fueled by prejudice, not evidence, and Marcus wasn't sure how far they'd take it. Carl drove with a scowl on his face, gripping the steering wheel tightly as if trying to squeeze answers out of it. Greg, sitting in the passenger seat, kept glancing nervously at Marcus through the rearview mirror. He seemed uncomfortable, fidgeting with his pen and tapping it against the dashboard. The tension between the two officers was palpable, though neither said a word. When they finally arrived at the station, Carl parked the car abruptly and got out, slamming the door behind him. Greg followed more slowly, still looking uneasy. Together they opened the back door and pulled Marcus out, practically dragging him toward the entrance. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow over the dull gray walls. A few other officers glanced up from their desks, curious about the commotion but not overly concerned. "All right, let's get this sorted," Carl muttered, leading Marcus to a small holding area. "You're going to tell us exactly why you were lurking around that store." Marcus clenched his jaw, refusing to rise to the bait. "I already told you. I was waiting for a friend. There's nothing suspicious about that." Carl ignored him, shoving Marcus into a chair near the booking desk. Yeah, we'll see about that." He turned to Greg. "Get started on the paperwork. I want this guy processed ASAP." Greg hesitated, his discomfort growing. "Carl, maybe we should—" "Do your job, Greg," Carl snapped, cutting him off. "We don't have time for second-guessing." Reluctantly, Greg nodded and began filling out forms while Carl paced back and forth, occasionally glaring at Marcus. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with hostility. Marcus tried to stay calm, focusing on his breathing and reminding himself that losing his temper wouldn't help the situation. As Greg worked, another officer entered the room, His name was Kevin Doyle, a younger man who had recently joined the force. Unlike Carl and Greg, Kevin prided himself on fairness and professionalism. He noticed Marcus sitting there, cuffed and clearly frustrated, and frowned. "What's going on here?" Kevin asked, his tone cautious but firm. Carl waved dismissively. "Just routine. Found this guy hanging around outside a store. Acting. All shady." Kevin raised an eyebrow, studying Marcus more closely. Something about him didn't fit the description of someone guilty or dangerous. For one thing, Marcus carried himself with quiet confidence, even in such a humiliating situation. Most people in his position would have been visibly upset or defensive, but Marcus remained composed. "You sure about that?" Kevin pressed, addressing Carl. "He doesn't look like he's causing any trouble now." "Oh, come on, Kevin," Carl scoffed. "Don't tell me you're falling for this act too. Guys like him always play innocent until they're caught, red-handed." Kevin bristled at the comment but chose not to argue. Instead, he stepped closer to Marcus, leaning down slightly to speak to him directly. "Hey, are you okay? Do you need anything?" Marcus looked up, surprised by the unexpected kindness. "I'm fine," he said evenly, "but I'd appreciate it if you could explain why I'm being treated like a criminal when I haven't done anything wrong." Before Kevin could respond, Carl intervened, irritated by the interruption. "Enough chit-chat, let's finish up and get him locked away. We can sort out the details later." Kevin straightened up, his expression hardening. "Actually, I think we should double-check before moving forward. It's protocol, isn't it? Make sure we're not jumping to conclusions." Greg paused mid-form, glancing nervously between Kevin and Carl. He knew Kevin had a point, but challenging Carl's authority was risky. Tensions within the department often ran high, especially when it came to cases involving race. Still, Greg couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about this arrest. Carl crossed his arms, glaring at Kevin. "Fine. Go ahead and waste everyone's time. But don't say I didn't warn you when it turns out he's exactly who we thought he was." Kevin nodded and turned his attention back to Marcus. "Can I see your ID again, please? Just to confirm everything checks out." Marcus tilted his head slightly, sensing an opportunity. "Sure," he said calmly. "But I already showed it to them earlier. My name is Marcus Johnson." At the mention of the name, Kevin froze, his eyes widening in recognition. Slowly, he straightened up and turned to face Carl and Greg. "Wait a minute. Did you say Marcus Johnson?" Carl frowned, confused. "Yeah, so what? That doesn't mean anything." Kevin swallowed hard, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Guys, do you realize who this is? This is Chief Marcus Johnson. He's the new head of the entire county police department." The room fell silent. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Then Carl's face went pale and Greg nearly dropped the pen he'd been holding. Both men stared at Marcus in stunned disbelief, their minds racing to process the gravity of their mistake. Marcus let the revelation sink in, watching as the officers scrambled to comprehend the enormity of their error. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice steady but laced with controlled anger. "Now that we've established my identity, perhaps you'd care to explain why I was arrested and treated like a common criminal," Carl stammered, struggling to find words. I didn't know. It was just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Marcus repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Is that what you call racial profiling and excessive force? Because I'd hate to think this kind of behavior is standard practice." Greg stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Chief, please, we had no idea. It won't happen again, I swear." Kevin quickly intervened, unlocking Marcus's handcuffs and helping him stand. "Chief Johnson, I am so sorry for what happened. This is completely unacceptable, and I assure you we'll handle this properly." Marcus rubbed his wrists, wincing slightly as the circulation returned. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside him. "Thank you, Officer Doyle. I appreciate your professionalism. As for the rest of you..." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across Carl and Greg. "We'll deal with this formally. Internal affairs will need to be involved, and I expect full cooperation." Carl and Greg exchanged panicked looks, realizing the severity of the consequences they faced. Their careers, and possibly their freedom, were now hanging by a thread. Meanwhile, Lisa Harper, the young journalist who had witnessed the initial confrontation, had arrived at the station. She approached the front desk cautiously, clutching her phone tightly. When she saw Marcus standing there, free from the cuffs, she hesitated, unsure if she should approach him. Sensing her presence, Marcus turned to face her, his expression softening slightly. "Miss Harper?" he asked, recognizing her from earlier. "Were you the one recording what happened tonight?" Lisa nodded, her heart pounding. "Yes, Chief Johnson, I wanted to make sure someone documented it. I hope that's okay." "It's more than okay," Marcus replied, offering her a small, grateful smile. "Your footage may be crucial in ensuring justice is served. Would you be willing to share it with us?" "Of course," Lisa said quickly. "Anything I can do to help." With that, Marcus turned back to Kevin and the others, his demeanor shifting back to authoritative. "Let's get started. This incident isn't just about me, it's about accountability and making sure this never happens again." As the group dispersed to begin addressing the fallout, Marcus allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew this was an opportunity to drive real change. With determination burning in his chest, he prepared to fight for justice, not just for himself but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. The hours that followed were a blur of activity at the police station. Word of what had happened spread quickly, like wildfire igniting dry grass. Officers whispered to each other in hushed tones, some shaking their heads in disbelief while others exchanged nervous glances. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating, as everyone tried to process the gravity of the situation. Lisa Harper sat in a small interview room, her phone clutched tightly in her hands. She replayed the video she had recorded earlier, her mind racing with thoughts about how it might impact the case. Though she was determined to stay calm, her heart still pounded every time she thought about confronting Carl and Greg, the two officers who had treated Marcus Johnson so unfairly. Marcus, now free from the handcuffs, stood outside the room with Kevin Doyle by his side. He was speaking quietly but firmly, outlining the steps they needed to take next. "We need to document everything," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Every detail matters. What they said, how they acted, and the reasons they gave for detaining me. This isn't just about holding them accountable. It's about showing the community that no one is above the law." Kevin nodded, scribbling notes onto a notepad. "Understood, Chief. I'll make sure we get all the facts straight. Internal Affairs will want a full report and we'll need to involve the district attorney too." "Good," Marcus replied. "And let's not forget Miss Harper. Her footage could be key evidence. If she's willing to cooperate, we should bring her into the loop." Just then, Lisa emerged from the room, looking hesitant but resolute. When she saw Marcus approaching, she straightened up, trying to appear more confident than she felt. "Chief Johnson," she began, her voice soft but clear. "I'm ready to share the video if you think it will help." Marcus offered her a reassuring smile. "Thank you, Miss Harper. Your courage in documenting this incident is invaluable. It's not easy to stand up when you see something wrong, but your actions tonight could make a real difference." Lisa nodded, though her cheeks flushed slightly at the compliment. "I just want to do the right thing. What happens now?" "For now," Marcus explained, "we'll review the footage together and decide how best to use it. But first, I'd like to hear your account of what happened. Sometimes even the smallest details can paint a clearer picture." The three of them returned to the interview room, where Lisa recounted everything she had witnessed outside the convenience store. She described how Carl and Greg had approached Marcus aggressively, ignored his polite responses, and escalated the situation unnecessarily. As she spoke, Marcus listened intently, nodding occasionally to encourage her to continue. When she finished, Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You've done an excellent job, Miss Harper. This kind of documentation is exactly what we need to address systemic issues within the department. Racism and abuse of power have no place in law enforcement, and your work tonight brings us one step closer to rooting them out." Lisa smiled faintly, feeling a mix of pride and apprehension. What about the officers? What happens to them now? Marcus sighed, his gaze dropping momentarily before he met hers again. That's a complicated question. They'll face an internal investigation, and depending on the findings, there could be criminal charges. But beyond punishing individuals, my focus is on creating lasting change, reforming policies, improving training, and rebuilding trust between the community and the police force. As they wrapped up the conversation, Kevin excused himself to check on the progress of the investigation. Left alone with Lisa, Marcus took a moment to thank her once more. You've put yourself in a difficult position by stepping forward, and I won't forget that. If you ever feel unsafe or need support, don't hesitate to reach out. I appreciate that, Lisa said sincerely. But honestly, I think staying silent would have been worse. Too many people look away when they see injustice. I didn't want to be one of them. Marcus nodded, admiration flickering in his eyes. That's a mindset we need more of. Not just in Maplewood, but everywhere. Thank you for being brave enough to speak up. Meanwhile, in another part of the station, Carl and Greg were reeling from the fallout of their actions. Both men had been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation, and their colleagues avoided them like they carried a contagious disease. Sitting slumped in chairs in a dimly lit break room, they stared blankly at the floor, their faces etched with fear and regret. This is a nightmare, Carl muttered, running a hand through his hair. How did we not recognize him? How could we screw up this badly? The days following the incident were a whirlwind of activity, both inside and outside the police department. The story of what happened to Marcus Johnson spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of Maplewood and beyond. People talked about it at grocery stores, in coffee shops, and on social media. Some were outraged, others shocked, but everyone had an opinion. Lisa Harper's video became the centerpiece of the growing public conversation. After consulting with Marcus and receiving his blessing, she uploaded the footage to her online platform. Within hours, it went viral, racking up thousands of views and sparking heated debates. Comments poured in from all over the country, some praising Lisa for her bravery, others condemning Carl and Greg for their actions. The hashtag #Justice for Marcus trended on social media, drawing attention not just to this specific case but to broader issues of racism and police misconduct. For Marcus, the sudden spotlight was overwhelming. He wasn't new to leadership or public speaking, but he hadn't expected this level of scrutiny so soon after taking office. Reporters camped outside his home, hoping to catch a glimpse of him leaving or returning. Phone calls flooded the station with people demanding answers or offering support. Despite the chaos, Marcus remained calm and focused. He knew this moment presented an opportunity to push for meaningful change. At the police station, internal affairs investigators worked tirelessly to piece together the events of that night. They interviewed witnesses, reviewed security footage from the convenience store, and examined Lisa's video frame by frame. Every detail mattered as they built a comprehensive report to present to higher authorities. Meanwhile, Carl and Greg were sequestered in separate rooms, answering questions under intense pressure. Their explanations were disjointed and defensive, often contradicting each other. It was clear they hadn't anticipated the magnitude of the consequences their actions would bring. Kevin Doyle played a crucial role during this time, acting as a liaison between Marcus and the investigative team. He admired Marcus's composure and determination, especially given the personal nature of the ordeal. "Chief," Kevin said one afternoon as they reviewed documents in Marcus's office, "you're handling this better than anyone could expect. Are you sure you don't need some time away to process everything?" Marcus looked up from the papers in front of him, his expression thoughtful. "I appreciate the concern, Kevin, but this isn't just about me. If I step back now, it sends the wrong message, that we're afraid to face these issues head on. Besides, I've spent years preparing for moments like this. We have a chance to make real progress, and I'm not going to waste it." Kevin nodded, though his brow furrowed slightly. Still dealing with something so personal, it can't be easy. "It's not," Marcus admitted quietly. "But if my experience helps shed light on systemic problems, then it's worth it." This isn't just about holding two officers accountable. It's about creating a culture where accountability is the norm, not the exception. While the investigation continued, tensions in the community reached a boiling point. Protests erupted across Mapleworth, drawing hundreds of residents who demanded justice for Marcus and reforms. Within the police force, signs reading "No more racism" and "Accountability now" filled the streets, while chants echoed through neighborhoods late into the night. Some demonstrations remained peaceful, while others turned confrontational when emotions ran high. Lisa found herself at the center of the movement, invited to speak at rallies and share her story. Though she initially hesitated, unsure if she deserved such attention, she eventually embraced the role. Standing before a crowd gathered in the town square, she held her phone aloft, a symbol of the power of documentation. "This isn't just about one man being mistreated," she declared, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. "It's about standing up when we see injustice, no matter how uncomfortable it makes us feel. Silence only perpetuates the problem." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom clapped and cheered in agreement. Among them was Marcus, watching from the sidelines with a mix of pride and gratitude. He approached Lisa after her speech, offering a warm handshake. "You're inspiring people, Miss Harper," he told her sincerely. "Keep doing what you're doing." "I'm just telling the truth," Lisa replied modestly. "That's all any of us can do." As the protests gained momentum, Carl and Greg faced mounting pressure. Both men struggled to cope with the weight of their mistakes. Carl, ever stubborn, refused to admit fault, insisting that he had simply been doing his job. "Anyone would have reacted the same way," he argued during one particularly heated interrogation. He matched the description of someone suspicious. Greg, however, couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at him. Late at night, he lay awake replaying the scene in his mind. The way Marcus had remained composed despite their aggression, the look of disbelief on bystanders' faces, the sinking realization that they had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. During his interviews with investigators, he broke down multiple times, confessing that he had known deep down their behavior was wrong, but hadn't spoken up because he feared confrontation with Carl. Their fractured partnership mirrored the larger divisions within the police force. Officers debated among themselves whether Carl and Greg deserved leniency or harsh punishment. Some defended their colleagues, claiming they had acted out of habit rather than malice. Others condemned them outright, arguing that their actions reflected poorly on the entire department. Amidst the turmoil, Marcus called a meeting with senior staff to discuss next steps. Sitting around a large conference table, he outlined a plan to address both immediate concerns and long-term goals. "First," he began, "we need transparency. The public deserves to know exactly what happened and how we intend to prevent it from happening again. Second, we must implement mandatory sensitivity training for all officers, not just a checkbox exercise, but something meaningful that challenges biases and fosters empathy. Finally, we should establish a civilian oversight committee to hold us accountable moving forward." His proposals sparked lively discussion, with some officers expressing skepticism about the feasibility of certain measures. But Marcus stood firm, emphasizing that change wouldn't come easily or quickly, but it was necessary nonetheless. "We serve the community," he reminded them. "If we lose their trust, we lose our purpose." By the end of the week, the internal affairs report was complete. It painted a damning picture of Carl and Greg's conduct, citing numerous violations of protocol and evidence of racial bias. Both men were formally charged with abuse of power and suspended without pay pending trial. News of their fate sent shockwaves through the department, forcing everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about their own behaviors and attitudes. For Marcus, the outcome was bittersweet. While he felt vindicated, he also recognized that punishing two individuals wouldn't solve the deeper issues plaguing law enforcement. As he left the station late one evening, he paused beneath the glow of a street lamp and gazed at the quiet town around him. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but he believed it was possible, if enough people committed to working toward it. And for the first time since that fateful night, Marcus allowed himself a small measure of hope. The trial of Carl Dawson and Greg Miller became the talk of Maplewood and beyond. It wasn't just a local case anymore. It had drawn national attention, with news outlets covering every twist and turn. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, microphones in hand, eager to capture sound bites from anyone willing to comment. Protesters gathered daily, holding signs that demanded justice while chanting slogans like "No more racism" and "Accountability starts now." The atmosphere was electric, charged with both anger and hope. Inside the courtroom, things were tense but orderly. Marcus Johnson sat quietly in the front row, dressed in a sharp suit and tie. His presence commanded respect not just because of his position, but because of the calm dignity he exuded. He didn't speak much during the proceedings, preferring to let the evidence do the talking. Lisa Harper sat nearby, clutching her notebook tightly, ready to document every detail for her next article. Her phone, the one that had captured the video, was entered as evidence, its footage projected onto a large screen for everyone to see. Carl and Greg looked visibly uncomfortable as they took their seats at the defendant's table. Their defense attorney, a wiry man named Mr. Peterson, argued that his clients had acted in good faith, claiming they had merely been following procedure. "They made an honest mistake," he said, pacing back and forth in front of the jury. "Yes, mistakes have consequences, but these officers deserve a second chance, not career-ending punishment." But the prosecution wasn't buying it. Led by Assistant District Attorney Rachel Bell, a no-nonsense woman known for her sharp arguments, the state presented a compelling case. She played sections of Lisa's video, pausing occasionally to highlight specific moments where Carl and Greg's behavior crossed the line. "This isn't about a misunderstanding," Rachel declared, pointing toward the screen. "It's about prejudice guiding action. These officers profiled Chief Johnson based on his race, ignored basic protocol, and violated his rights. That's not acceptable. Not in this town. Not anywhere." Witness testimonies followed, including those from bystanders who had seen the arrest unfold. One elderly woman described how she had felt sick to her stomach watching Carl shove Marcus against the patrol car. A teenage boy recounted how he'd wanted to step in but was too scared of what might happen if he did. Each story added weight to the prosecution's argument, painting a vivid picture of the fear and frustration experienced by marginalized communities when faced with unchecked authority. When it came time for Marcus to testify, the room fell silent. All eyes were on him as he walked to the stand, his steps measured and deliberate. He raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth, then settled into the chair, meeting the gaze of the judge and jury with unwavering confidence. "Chief Johnson," Rachel began, her tone respectful but firm, "can you describe what happened the night you were detained?" Marcus nodded, taking a moment to gather his thoughts before speaking. "I was standing outside a convenience store waiting for a friend. 2 officers approached me and accused me of suspicious activity without providing any reason. When I asked them to explain themselves, they grew aggressive and refused to listen. Despite showing them my ID and explaining my intentions clearly, they handcuffed me and placed me in their vehicle. At no point did I resist or act in a way that justified their treatment of me." His words carried a quiet power, each sentence delivered with precision. As he spoke, Carl shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact while Greg stared at the floor, his face flushed with shame. Rachel pressed further. "Did either officer identify themselves properly, or inform you of why you were being detained?" "No," Marcus replied. "They assumed I was guilty simply because of how I looked. They didn't ask questions, they jumped to conclusions." The defense attorney, Mr. Peterson, tried to poke holes in Marcus's testimony during cross-examination, suggesting that perhaps Marcus had misunderstood the situation. But Marcus remained composed, countering every question with clarity and poise. By the time he stepped down from the stand, there was little doubt in anyone's mind about the validity of his account. Outside the courtroom, the protest continued, growing larger and louder with each passing day. Community leaders joined forces, with activists to organize marches, rallies, and town hall meetings. People shared their own stories of mistreatment at the hands of law enforcement, creating a chorus of voices demanding systemic change. For many residents of Maplewood, this trial represented more than just accountability for Carl and Greg. It symbolized an opportunity to address decades of inequality and mistrust. Lisa Harper covered it all, her articles reaching audiences far beyond Maplewood. She interviewed protesters, attended community meetings, and even spoke with former police officers who admitted that racism within the force was a long-standing issue. Her work earned her praise from readers across the country, though it also attracted criticism from those who dismissed her as biased or sensationalist. Still, Lisa refused to back down, believing deeply in the importance of shining a light on injustice. One evening, after a particularly emotional rally, Lisa found herself sitting on a park bench with Marcus. Both were tired but determined, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of streetlights. "Do you think anything will actually change?" Lisa asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Or are we just shouting into the void?" Marcus leaned back, considering her question carefully. "Change is slow, Lisa. It doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen without resistance. But every voice matters. Every protest, every article, every conversation, it all adds up. We're planting seeds, even if we don't get to see the flowers bloom." Lisa nodded, though skepticism lingered in her expression. "I guess I just wish it didn't feel so hopeless sometimes." "It does feel hopeless," Marcus admitted, "but giving up won't help anyone. If we keep pushing, keep fighting, eventually something has to give. And maybe, just maybe, this trial will be the catalyst we need." As the trial entered its final days, closing arguments brought the courtroom to life. Rachel Bell delivered a passionate speech, urging the jury to consider the broader implications of their decision. "This isn't just about two officers," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "It's about sending a message to this department, to this town, to this country, that racism and abuse of power will not be tolerated. Justice isn't blind. It sees everything, and it demands accountability." Mr. Peterson countered with a plea for leniency, arguing that Carl and Greg were products of a flawed system rather than inherently bad individuals. "Punishing them won't fix the problem," he insisted. "Let's focus on reform instead of ruin." After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty on all counts. Carl and Greg were sentenced to probation, mandatory, sensitivity training, and permanent removal from the police force. While some viewed the punishment as insufficient, others saw it as a step in the right direction, a sign that accountability was possible, even for those in positions of power. In the weeks that followed, Maplewood began to transform. Under Marcus's leadership, the police department implemented sweeping reforms, including stricter hiring standards, ongoing diversity training, and increased transparency measures. A civilian oversight committee was established, giving residents a direct role in monitoring law enforcement practices. Community outreach programs flourished, fostering dialogue between officers and the people they served. For Marcus, the victory was bittersweet. He knew the road ahead would still be fraught with challenges, but he also believed that progress was worth fighting for. Late one evening, as he stood on the steps of the police station looking out over the town, he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. Change wouldn't come easily, but it was happening, one step at a time. Months had passed since the trial of Carl Dawson and Greg Miller, and Maplewood was beginning to feel like a different place. The streets seemed quieter, not because people were staying indoors, but because there was a sense of cautious optimism in the air. The protests had died down, replaced by community events that brought neighbors together. Conversations about race and policing were no longer whispered behind closed doors. They were happening openly, with honesty and vulnerability. Marcus Johnson had become a symbol of hope for many residents. His leadership wasn't just about enforcing rules. It was about listening, learning, and leading by example. Every morning he arrived at the police station early, ready to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead. He spent hours meeting with officers, discussing ways to improve their interactions with the public. Some were resistant at first, clinging to old habits and attitudes, but Marcus's persistence paid off. Slowly but surely, minds began to change. One of the biggest changes came in the form of training programs. Marcus worked closely with experts in diversity and bias awareness to design sessions that went beyond surface-level education. These weren't lectures where officers sat passively taking notes. They were interactive workshops that encouraged self-reflection and dialogue. Officers participated in role-playing exercises, stepping into the shoes of individuals from marginalized communities. For some, it was an eye-opening experience. For others, it reinforced lessons they already knew but hadn't fully embraced. Kevin Doyle, who had stood by Marcus during the initial incident, became one of the program's strongest advocates. "It's not about pointing fingers," Kevin often said during training sessions. "It's about understanding where we've gone wrong so we can do better moving forward." His words resonated with many of his colleagues, helping bridge gaps between those eager for reform and those hesitant to embrace it. Lisa Harper continued her work as a journalist, though her focus shifted slightly. Instead of solely reporting on injustice, she began highlighting stories of progress and resilience. She wrote articles about community members working alongside police officers to clean up parks, organize food drives, and mentor local youth. Her pieces painted a picture of a town striving to heal, even if scars remained. One day, while interviewing a group of teenagers involved in a new mentorship program, Lisa found herself reflecting on how far things had come. A young boy named Jamal, barely 16, shared his thoughts candidly. "I used to hate cops," he admitted, fidgeting with the hem of his hoodie. "But Officer Patel, he's been cool. He listens when I talk, you know? Like, he actually cares." Lisa smiled, jotting down his words. "That's great to hear, Jamal. Do you think more officers should be like him?" "Yeah," Jamal replied without hesitation. "If they all acted like him, maybe people wouldn't be so scared of them." His comment stayed with Lisa long after the interview ended. It reminded her of why she had started documenting these issues in the first place, not to tear down, but to build up. As she walked back to her car, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Change might be slow, but it was real, and she was grateful to play a part in amplifying voices that mattered. For Carl Dawson and Greg Miller, life had taken a drastic turn. Stripped of their badges and facing legal restrictions, they struggled to adjust to civilian life. Carl sank into bitterness, blaming everyone except himself for his downfall. He avoided social gatherings, isolating himself from friends and family. Whenever someone mentioned Marcus Johnson or the trial, he would snap defensively, insisting he'd done nothing wrong. Greg, on the other hand, wrestled with guilt in private. He attended therapy sessions as part of his probation requirements, though initially reluctant. Over time, however, he began opening up about his fears, frustrations, and regrets. His therapist encouraged him to volunteer in the community as a way to make amends. At first, Greg resisted the idea, convinced no one would want anything to do with him, but eventually, he agreed to help out at a local food bank. To his surprise, people didn't treat him with hostility, at least not all of them. Some volunteers gave him wary looks, but others welcomed him warmly, focusing on the present rather than the past. One elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson struck up a conversation with him one afternoon while sorting canned goods. "We've all made mistakes," she said kindly. "What matters is what we do next." Her words stuck with Greg, planting a seed of hope he hadn't felt in months. Maybe redemption was possible after all. As the year drew to a close, Maplewood hosted its annual Unity Festival, a celebration of diversity and cooperation. The event featured live music, food trucks, art displays, and speeches from community leaders. Marcus stood on stage, addressing the crowd gathered in the park. Families sat on blankets, children ran around laughing, and the smell of grilled food filled the air. "Tonight," Marcus began, his voice carrying over the hum of conversation, "we celebrate not just our differences but our shared humanity. We've faced challenges this year, painful ones, but we've also grown stronger because of them. Together, we've shown that accountability and compassion aren't opposing forces, they go hand in hand." The audience erupted in applause, cheering loudly. Lisa watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride. Nearby, Kevin clapped enthusiastically, grinning ear to ear. Even Greg, standing near the edge of the crowd, managed a small smile, feeling, for the first time in a long time, a glimmer of belonging. Back at home later that evening, Marcus sat in his living room, flipping through a photo album. Pictures of his family, friends, and colleagues filled the pages, each one telling a story of connection and resilience. He paused on a recent snapshot of himself shaking hands with a young boy at a community event. The child's wide grin mirrored Marcus's own, a reminder of why he kept fighting for change. Change wasn't easy, it never was, but it was worth it. Every step forward, no matter how small, brought Maplewood closer to becoming the kind of town where everyone felt safe, respected and valued, and though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, Marcus believed in the power of perseverance. Outside, the night sky sparkled with stars, vast and infinite. Marcus gazed out the window, letting the quiet beauty of the moment wash over him. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new opportunities, and new chances to make a difference. But for now, he allowed himself to rest, knowing that progress, real, meaningful progress, was within reach.